So we gave you a slew of shows and movies to watch, but we're going to give you this last one. This is the classic Indian Predator series on Netflix, season 3, or the third installment, however you want to view it. This is Indian Predator: Murder in a Courtroom, and this is about the gangster and ultimately the death of Akku Yadav, and mid to the early 2000s. So Akku Yadav, he was an Indian gangster as well as like a serial rapist and a serial killer. He was known to have essentially raped and or murdered around 40 to 50 women, specifically in India's central city, Nagpur. Is that the correct pronunciation? Yeah. And he did his business in the slums of the city, which at this time, rape was something that was very like stigmatized. So a lot of times, if he didn't kill his victim, he would rape them, in order to silence them. And it was so bad at this time, and he was such an influential person in the city that even the police were on his side. So if a victim were to go to the police, he would show up at their house and either demand for money or decide to kill them. And so, ultimately, what led to him being captured was he went over to a girl's house and the girl had the door locked. And so him and his, associates were essentially trying to break in. And she turns on the gas of her home and pretty much says, if you break open this door, I will light the match. And so, Yadav and the associates actually smell the gas and they start walking away. Now, people in the street, after they hear about what this girl did, it was kind of empowering to some of the people, not only former victims, but other women in these neighborhoods. And anytime they would see an associate, they would throw stones at them. They would actually try and even, potentially kill them. And this made Yadav like very nervous. People were actually starting to come after him. And so for his protection, he turned himself into the police, or he turned himself in for protection. The police then arrested him and took him to jail. So on the day of his court, what was happening, in between his court and whenever he was, in police custody, there were a bunch of women that were kind of planning to, show up to this court date, with really just, stones, chili powder, and even a knife in their hands. What ended up happening is he comes into the court trial, he sees, former victims in the crowd, and he starts mocking them, and all hell breaks loose. About 50 or so women start storming where he is seated, and they are stabbing him. They're throwing chili powder in his eyes, and they don't do this quickly. For about 15 minutes, they are murdering this guy, each woman taking a stab at him in the courtroom, until eventually he ends up dying. So with that kind of backstory, this is what this new installment of Indian Predator: Murder in a Courtroom is all about. And what I really enjoy about not only the previous installments, but especially this one, is that it takes the storyline and inserts interviews and just kind of as the story is going along. And all the interviews are very integral to what's happening during the plot development. It's pretty spooky. It's pretty, it just kind of has a better way to I would say, characterize, what was happening at the time. And I know I gave a big 30,000 feet on that, a little bit about what was going on, but what do you think was, we've seen Indian Predator numerous times. We've reviewed the previous installments, but with, that kind of context, what do you think about this Netflix series, really did this, case justice?
I think this was the best out of the series so far. It's unlike its predecessors, both in tone and pace, definitely. The narrative is actually pretty gripping and surprisingly chilling as well. The first episode begins with the incident that made headlines forever: passion and rage-filled lynching of notorious criminal Akku Yadav, banged in the middle of a courtroom in broad daylight, carried out by 50 feisty slum women armed to the teeth with chili powder, stones, and kitchen knives. And I remember reviewing a movie earlier that was it was called 300. It was called 100. I'm forgetting know the movie, but it's streaming on Z5 definitely. By the way, the series is on Netflix, guys. Indian Predator: Murder in the Courtroom, isn't it? And that movie was about the same incident as well, when these women stormed into the courtroom and they stabbed this person to death. But the series straight away trains the spotlight on these, outspoken women, these gutsy old and young women that carried out a stunning killing of a man who almost terrorized them for almost more than a decade. And the women speak up, and they help the viewer piece together as to why they did what they did and how their lives were in the hand of this crazy monster, Akku Yadav. They narrate how Akku, with petty burglaries, the extortion, and soon graduating to grisly murders, got away with it. And then the second episode goes a little grimmer, and the women try to detail the sexual assaults, almost 40 documented rapes, and numerous undocumented ones as well. And Akku Yadav's youngest rape victim was around 10 years old or something. And she also testifies to the monstrosity of the man. And then finally, the women relate how, when they repeatedly complained to the police and it all went unheeded, they took matters into their own hand, and how they planned the lynching meticulously, and they saw to a grisly end. But the standard element of the entire narration is the pride that shines in the face of each woman as she owns up to being a conspirator in the courtroom murder. And the best part of the series is interviewing with real life people who witnessed this entire sordid saga from close quarters. They included friends and acquaintances of Akku Yadav, even his family lawyer, and the sister of the woman he murdered brutally, some social activists who stood up for the women, the police, the journalists, and of course the women at the center of the tale. Then I thought the infuriating part is when when a few of those interviewed, all men, they started doubting the sexual assaults. I thought that was really disrespectful and infuriating. Also unnerving was the impunity with which Akku Yadav was let off from jail every time he was incarcerated for a crime, and that is what led to the frustration amongst the women. And it really lays bare open how criminals and cops are and politicians are all intermingled in power and money, right? So the director of the series is Umesh Vinay Kulkarni, and he shot each story with really amazing sensitivity. We have to give it to them. All incidents, murders, sexual assaults are hinted at, and he doesn't actually show them, but he creates a really good canvas out of it without really showing it. And so he completely stays away from titillation aspect of such stories where all this crime can be shown, but he doesn't show it on screen. He just alludes to it. I thought the cinematography was excellent. It lends light to the amount of grimness and gravitas to storytelling. It's never on your face. It's never in your face. It's never frivolous or artificial. It's really real. And these are the things that I really loved about this season of Indian Predator. And though the narrative in some parts does get repetitive, especially when you're doing so many interviews, but I thought on the whole, I absolutely loved watching this season of Indian Predator because of the delicate manner in which this entire incident was handled.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I really love Indian Predator. I think they do a good job every time in their installment, but this one definitely beat the other two by quite a big margin. And it's sponsored. It's a Netflix original, so hopefully we'll be seeing more installments and bringing those more to you. But with that is all we have for you guys today. This was a big lineup. We had 4. Some really great, some not so great. Series and films to talk about, and we really hope you enjoyed them. So make sure to give us a like and follow on our Twitter and Instagram. Daisy's Alivegram on Instagram, Daisy's Alive on Twitter. Make sure to check out and even leave your own review or comment on our website. We always respond to our fans. But until then, this is all for now. Signing off.